Welcome to the Get Real Podcast, your high-octane boost of full-on reality therapy for personal, business, and investing success with your host, Ron Phillips, because somebody's got to tell it like it is.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Get Real Podcast. Ron Phillips here. And I've got a kind of I guess I would call it a follow-up to our conversation with Brian Mertz from a few shows ago. And if you missed that one, I highly encourage you to go and take a look. It was fascinating to hear what he had to say about construction, what's going on, what's really causing a major part of this housing affordability crisis that we have. And lo and behold, I'm taking a look at the real estate news this morning, and California enters the picture. Now, before I say anything, I would assume you would think, oh boy, what has California now done to repress construction even more than they already have? But I bring you good news, good tidings of great joy from the state of California. For whatever reason, that's not true. We all know what the reason is. Gavin Newsom's going to run for president, so he has to run towards the center. And because of that, California is the great beneficiary of something that I would have never in a million years thought would happen. But here it is. I don't know if you've ever heard really of the California Environmental Quality Act, but you've probably heard about what it does in many instances. But with the passage of a new budget-linked House bill, the state just scaled back the reach of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which basically was a roadblock to nearly any construction. And I say roadblock, it was like one of those, it's supposed to be a speed bump, but it's like the size that you would pull up to it and go, oh man, how am I going to drive over that without reducing it? And it takes forever to actually sand that puppy back down, grind it down to a nice level. As I read this, and I'm going to point out a few things as I go through this, but as I read this, I was like, you have got to be kidding me right now. I mean, I knew it was bad, but some of this, I mean, I had no idea. As I'm reading through this, what it actually used to do, and now supposedly no longer does. This is what this legislation is supposed to do. It exempts most urban infill housing projects from CEQA requirements. Now, I want you to just go with me for a second here, okay? An urban infill housing project, I would love for someone to help me understand how the Environmental Quality Act should have any governance over an infill housing project. By definition, if you don't know, an infill project is one where there's houses all around, and for whatever reason, we've got a piece of ground here. Either something burned down, they tore something down, whatever. We're filling in a place that doesn't have anything built on it right now in an urban area. Okay. Every study under the sun should have already been done for that particular land. Shouldn't be an issue, right? This should be a no-brainer. Well, apparently not a no-brainer. Apparently kind of a really big problem in California. I actually never realized, I should have realized. I never realized that the environmental issues were for infill projects. What a crazy world. So this means that apartment buildings, similar projects in cities and areas will no longer face environmental lawsuits over traffic, noise, air quality, or anything else like that, that delay this quote unquote affordable housing that everybody screams they want, that we talked with Brian about the other day. Now, Brian talked about a bunch of stuff that's happening in the Midwest. This is really positive because I tell you, things start in California and then they spread. So if this is what's going on in California, if people in California have said, now I'll also say this is a super majority Democrat led state. So the fact that people have screamed so loud now that even the environmentalists are passing things like this is a good sign, I think, for the rest of the country. Because if this is starting to spread, maybe we can reduce some of the things that we talked about with Brian a couple of weeks ago. So CEQA has been around for more than 5 decades. The one thing I think that screams what CEQA actually did to construction is that it's a massive time and resource suck. Because in order to get anything passed through there, you have to spend a ton of money on attorneys, and then it just takes forever to get anything done. It says if you can get out of that 6 months, 9 months, 12 months of delay, that it takes a whole cohort of projects and gets them to the ground sooner in a state that's facing a housing crisis, that's not for nothing. That's actually a good thing. Okay, so let's talk about what else this does. We talked about the urban infill. The exemption also applies to projects under 20 acres and those that align with existing local zoning. Again, the zoning is in place because it's supposedly already been through a lot of this stuff. And, a small parcel of 20 acres shouldn't be that big of a deal. This all sounds positive to me so far. Developers must notify any affiliated tribal governments, but consultation is kept to a tight timeline. So again, we're not going to let other people slow this down. Some wage and labor rules apply, of course, in California for taller buildings or for fully affordable developments. But most projects face fewer restrictions than ever before. This is really good stuff. Back in 2016, according to this article, now I vaguely remember something like this, but it's been a lot of years ago. So back in 2016, Governor Jerry Brown tried and failed to pass something similar to this. Okay. His plan was to allow affordable units in exchange for faster approvals, but that was killed by all of the, normal offenders, right? That would have been pretty good because then you could have had some affordable projects that were built in a state where literally nothing is affordable. California is so expensive. I think I've talked about on the show before, the city that I live in, so not the state, the city that I live in is so expensive, and they have so kept out development of affordable apartments and things like that, that the people who actually do the work in this city can't live here. They have to commute. In Charleston, where I live, the commute crosses bridges. If there's anything that happens on the bridge, I was just eating dinner at our local favorite restaurant last night. And the manager who we're friends with there, he said, on Saturday, we were half staffed because the bridge was shut down for 3 hours. And the workers couldn't get in there. Why? Because they can't live in the city, because the city has effectively priced them out not by the same things as California, but similar, through zoning and things like that we talked about with Brian. So in 2016, this was shot down, as you would expect. I'm literally floored that this passed. I'm not floored that Newsom would push this because he's going to run for president. I'm pretty convinced of that. I think this is a good thing, and a good thing coming out of California. Now, a couple of things. It's interesting to note in this article that I'm reading, they pose the question, will this actually spur development? A couple of people in here commented. One says, I don't think this is going to make more development happen. A guy named Rhodes. It's going to make development that is already happening easier, because developers still face hurdles like high labor costs, interest rates, local permitting, fees, tariffs, immigration-related workforce issues. So there's a whole host of other things like we talked about with Brian, right? If your local permitting and your fees and everything are so out of control that it makes it impossible to build affordable housing, it doesn't really make any difference whether you streamline the process that's still unaffordable. So while this is positive, there's still things that need to be done in order to actually affect affordable housing, people actually being able to build affordable housing in the state of California. And this is what I was saying earlier. When you are building housing in an existing community that is environmentally beneficial, it is climate friendly, that is not something that should be subjected to potentially endless CEQA challenges and lawsuits. 100% agreement. That just makes total sense. How in the world could this not make any sense to the people who are running a state? And I will tell you, it's because most of the people who are in government, who are elected, didn't really run anything ever. They're completely unqualified to make any of these decisions, and yet we elect them, and they do, for a whole bunch of special interests that pay them. And that is legitimately what happens. So we'll see, because the state's now entering this new phase of housing policy, and there's no longer an excuse for slow construction in California cities. So what's going to happen next? It's going to depend on whether the developers can say, hey, look, this is fantastic, but we still need the willingness from the cities to give us capacity to build. They need to provide us the permits quickly, and they also need to help us with fees and everything else so that we can actually build something that is relatively affordable. But again, super positive, because everything flows. It seems like everything flows from California. So hopefully this trend starts to shift across the country, and we see a lot of this overregulation just kind of fade away into the background, because it is all really so sad for what we need. We're so many millions of units short right now, and we need the ability to build more units, a more affordable price. And then, like I've said before, if interest rates tick down even just a little bit, we're going to see this shadow demand rear its head and start taking this inventory off the market. So there's a market update. I want to give you a little bit more information since we talked to Brian a few weeks ago. There it is. Straight out of California. Good news for a change. And until next week, get out there and make something happen.
This has been the Get Real Podcast. To subscribe and for more information, including a list of all episodes, go to getrealestatesuccess.com.